Hi, this is Jane Galloway, welcoming you to week number 3, a podcast for the Gateways, the Wisdom of 12-Step Spirituality. You know, I've been doing a lot of thinking as I've worked through this method that has kind of downloaded through me after many, many years of working these steps and the deeper principles involved with the 12 steps. And words have been popping out at me a lot. Words that really need to be clarified for a holistic audience, for a holistic approach to recovery. So today I want to talk about a few words, and we're going to look at Gateway Essence 2 as well, which is focused on process. And I'm going to tell you some wonderful tools and some of the developmental ideas about Gateway number 2. But really, I'd like to talk for today's podcast even more about how all of this work came to be. I have been interested in developmental psychology really since I was a small child, believe it or not. My family was great. I loved my family. I mean, they were dramatic and they were emotional, and there were many, many talented, amazingly gifted people in my family. And for generations, my family was affected by the disease of alcoholism. So while my family was fantastic, there were many, many times when I felt, even from the time I was a very small child, that the rug was being pulled out from under me emotionally. By living in that family, I would just kind of get used to something happening and get some consistency going, and whoosh, there was a move, there was a trauma, there was a drama, there was a fight, there was something. And something inside of me absolutely longed for consistency. You know, I think that people who become addicted either to a substance or to control, which is what the Al-Anon personality can really become hooked on, are unbelievably resilient, because we're presented with families where things are not within our control, where things are very chaotic at times. And we figure out ways to try to be kind of the still constant in the middle of shifting sands. And this really isn't easy. I mean, it's really, really, really not easy. So the reason I'm talking about this part of things is that when I was a child, I discovered a book in my father's bookcase. My father was sober in AA for many years. I never knew him not to be sober in AA. He died when I was 16. But he had the complete works of Sigmund Freud in his at his apartment. My parents were divorced, so when I'd go over there on the weekends, I wasn't going for the light stuff. At age 8, I was reading Sigmund Freud, or trying to understand what this guy was talking about, because I thought, I have no idea what this is about, but I think this could help my family. And I've been interested in developmental systems, how things start and develop and give you a strong foundation, because I longed for one. I longed for stability in my life. I don't know that Sigmund Freud, I mean, he's a psychiatrist, kind of the father of modern psychiatry, so we wouldn't call his model necessarily developmental, but I did get a very strong interest in what it took to build a strong foundation that a person could then really grow a healthy life out of, okay? So a lot of these different formulas I looked at were things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow, the psychologist Maslow, realized at some point, wait a minute, we're studying all of these very, very ill people and basing psychology upon that. Why aren't we studying the habits of highly functional people, of people who are overcomers, people who conquer adversity? Why aren't we looking at them? Highly actualized people is what he called it. So he developed a system. He began a study of that to look at, okay, what makes people, first it seemed that people really needed to have a foundation in terms of really basic security. And so he then developed a method that kind of went up in a triangular shape from that. Then I discovered, wow, there are so many different methods. Erik Erikson is another psychiatrist, psychologist who studied, he looked at 8 ages of man, he called it, but of life. You know, what are the life stages we encounter, and how do we successfully conquer one stage and then move on to the next stage of our lives. And then as I got more interested in spiritual things, when I got involved with the 12-step programs, I started to realize, wow, these 12 steps are kind of like the original developmental model. I mean, it's so great because we start out with saying, you know, admitted we're powerless over whatever it is in our lives. In the steps it says alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And then we move on upward to really look at, okay, how can I get some reliance upon something bigger than me? And in the steps it's called a power greater than ourselves, and that's the spiritual function, right? So over the years of studying these steps and working them, because they honestly saved my life and continue to. So over the years of working them, studying them, etc., I began to draw these grids. I was drawing the Kabbalah Sephirot, which is kind of like the tree of life, and that's a developmental model. I was drawing the chakra system, and I was putting those next to the 12 steps and saying, wait a minute, these correlate with each other. You have to kind of build a base and then move upward from then. And we say upward, but really it kind of is upward, the idea of higher states of enlightenment, et cetera. Okay. So the chakra system, then I began to get very interested in the Chinese meridian system, and that goes throughout the body and really builds pathways of relatedness to keep the chi flowing in a healthy way in human beings, chi or life force, the energy. So I, for really a number of years, a lot of years, maybe even 15 or 20 years, I was drawing these diagrams, these really scaffoldings of developmental paths, and I was using them as, I don't know, I mean, I just kept going back to them and looking at them and really realizing that there was some way that they all related to one another. So at a certain point, it became clear that it could be really, really helpful to people who were using the 12 steps to understand them, not just as a recovery method, but really to understand the steps as this body, mind, spirit developmental model. So that's how this work, the gateways, really came to be. Actually, a friend and colleague said to me one day, you know, Jane, you can teach so many things, and that's great, but what we want to know, and she was talking about she and some colleagues, friends in New York, she said, what we want to know is what works for you. And I instantly said, oh, well, that's easy. It's the 12 steps plus all of these psycho-spiritual tools and practices that I have utilized along with them over the years. And when I say over the years, I'm talking over 3 decades. And she said, write that. We need to see that. And so I began writing. And so that was the beginning of a 4-year period. So you hear this from writers, and I would like to echo it here. When I say I wrote this book, I did. I sat sometimes for 10 hours a day. You can ask my chiropractor about that. I'm still not completely glued back together from that, because I was just typing and writing, and it began to be the only thing that was happening that really excited me for a 4-year period. However, more than writing it, I mean, I was the machine that was writing it and my great MacBook Pro, but I feel really like I was more downloading it. I was downloading this higher information that really wanted to use me to come through. That was a fantastic experience. And you know, I'm sure many of you have heard about flow. When we get into a state of flow, time passes. We don't even know that time has gone by. And, you know, long periods of time, and we're in writing or sewing or creating. A lot of artists feel this. Sculptors, I've heard sculptors talk about, I don't know, I worked on this thing for, 15 hours straight. I was just in ecstasy. So flow is this amazing state we get into. And this is really kind of the magic of downloading higher wisdom through our being, through our body. So flow is the state I was in while I was writing this. Then the gateways. So when I say I wrote it, I did write it. But I really downloaded it. So in a sense, it's a channeled work. I have come to think, as I've really worked on the method, I have come to think that all works of creativity are downloaded. I've really come to feel that all works of creativity are downloaded works. So, I mean, I don't want to speak in that huge, grandiose way, but anyway, okay. So let's get on with this gateway number 2. I thought you'd be interested to know kind of how this all began or developed. So gateway number 2 correlates with step number 2, and it says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So when I was addressing this in the beginning of this podcast today, what I was talking about had to do with this idea of words and looking at, I think I have to rethink that, because I've also worked quite a lot with people in the community who have been called mentally ill. And over the years, as I've worked with them, what I've discovered about them is that, in fact, these are some of the most tuned-in people, certainly highly, highly, highly sensitive to the environment. And, when a lot of discord is happening in the environment, people with so-called mental illness often, they don't have a filter between all of the stuff on the news and the culture and their own emotions. And so they begin to react. But over the years of working with people with so-called mental illness, I have learned that words like sanity and insanity need to kind of be unpacked or rethought. Also something like crazy. I just felt crazy the other day. I've had it pointed out to me by people in the mental health community that's probably something I should think twice about using to be sensitive. So this step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity is something that has to be looked at in that light. I mean, so what do we mean by sanity, and what do we mean by then the converse of that, or the reverse of it, which would be insanity? And that's really what we're getting at here. I think the way that's best for me to define this in my own experience, and certainly with this level of growth, utilizing the 12 steps, is that once there has been some fundamental acquiescence to the fact that, I'm powerless for this thing. I'm powerless. That's step 1. There is then an opening to let some light in. So that's where the coming to believe part comes in. It's a process. And how I would define the sanity or insanity part is that people who have become addicted or very, very troubled, even if they're not addicted to something, become sometimes delusional and are acting like they're not, walking through the world, being successful in professions, being fathers and mothers of families, et cetera, but are not whole. They are not grounded in their own wholeness and their own rootedness to their real gift and their real nature. So, in fact, they are split off, detached, and some of the behavior that results from a person who is habitually split off from their highest nature really is viewed as insane. Sometimes people become outrageously angry or do very dramatic and chaotic actions or abusive things under the influence of really what I think is at the root of this, which is fear. So as we look at this idea of sanity and insanity, the process of gateway number 2 is really about bringing us back to the center of our own being, where we are able to be then in touch with that base level that I'm talking about from all of those developmental systems. Remember, I just said that I was drawing all these things for years, where we can get back in touch with our own real trunk of our own tree. And so it's step 1 and 2 really go together. So coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us. So that means there's something that you are uniquely supposed to be. There is an essence of you, of you-ness, that is only you. That's your own, that is a gift that you are going to contribute to this world, that really only you, in the specificity of who you are, can contribute. And so when we're trying to be what other people want us to be, we're trying to make it in a world where the rug is being pulled out from under us all the time, where we're living and trying to accommodate to the actions of families that are chaotic. Oftentimes we're not acting out of that central place because, you know what, a lot of us are told that it's not okay. Why are you doing that? Why are you talking like that? That's not how I want you to be. Be like I tell you to be. And so because usually this starts pretty young, we want to be safe and we want to be approved of. We want to be part of the swim of things. We want to be approved of by those people who are our caretakers as young people, so we try to change. It's like, okay, you don't like that? How about this? Let's see if we can figure this out. And so oftentimes by the time we get to step 2, we are really, in a sense, sometimes almost dangerously out of touch with our basic nature. Who am I? Who are we? Who really are we? And so this process is very powerful, this coming to believe, because it also connotes a certain receptivity. It means, okay, I'm willing to let a little bit of light in and recognize that something larger than me actually created me and continues to create me with each breath. And so I am, seems okay right now. Well, maybe it's okay right now. So just the process of I'm coming to believe that it's safer than I thought it was. I'm coming to believe that I'm kind of coming back to this authenticity, this sense of authenticity, which is what I would call sanity. That's uniquely you. You may have not gotten approval for who that is from your parent or parents or your family circle. You may have not gotten approval from that from certain people in school. Whatever your situation was, whatever made you hide that isness that is essentially you, it's critical at this point as we're working through these different layers of these developmental systems toward wholeness. Wholeness, that's what we're getting at here, right? That you get back in touch with who that person is. Who is that person? Because that is your gift. I think one of the most touching things I have seen with many people who are working through these different layers of self-revelation is, one of the coolest things and most touching, is when people say, wait a minute, I remember I used to always ... I loved animals. I was always interested in nature. I was always, suddenly there's a wonderful Zen Buddhist koan that, what is your voice, your parents' voice? I think it's this way. I think it's what is your voice before your parents were born? That'll get you thinking a little bit, right? What is your sound of your voice before your parents were born? So that essential you-ness is what we're getting back to. And it's at this stage of the work, it's very touching to watch people start to remember, wait a minute, that's me. I remember me. So this came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to wholeness, really to wholeness. And wholeness is, in fact, synonymous with sanity in the way that we understand it. Sanity, wholeness, something bigger than me has the power. I have certainly made a mess out of things, right? That's kind of where we are when we're working through this stuff and in recovery. But wait a minute, there is somebody out there who's got my blueprint. I'm going to turn my will and my life. That is probably, if I'm going to turn my energies over to anybody or anything or any force, it has to be some kind of force that has an idea of what the original blueprint is. So step 2, as I've just said, is this coming to believe thing. The chakra is at the stage of our body at the lower abdomen where emotions, creativity, and sexuality are all in the mix. Those are the functions. The shape on the chakra, on Swadhisthana, is a left-facing crescent moon. The color is orange. Musical notes are D and C sharp. Gemstone therapy would be through goldstone and carnelian. And the meridian, the Chinese meridians that correlate with this area, also are right there in that area. They govern bladder, kidney, large intestine, testicles, and ovaries. So that's generativity, which Erik Erikson talks about. That's one of the stages, one of the 8 ages of man or woman, is this idea to want to create something bigger than ourselves. In some people and many people, it's to have a child. In other people, it is to create an opus, a work, to write a book, to publish something original, whatever, but to generate something beyond ourselves. So as we kind of reflect upon this layer of growth, I'd like to suggest a ritual that's really been extremely helpful to me, and I think it will be to you. So try it. One is, before we get to the moving meditation, it's a walking meditation. That's what the thing I'm going to tell you about. But before we get there, I suggest that really surrounding ourselves at this point. I happen to love citrus smell, the scent of citrus. So I use a lot of orange oil, tangerine oil. I use it in the bath. I use it in a little dish and smell it through the house. I just love it. It's very invigorating and comforting to me. I love it. But so at this level with gateway number 2, I would really recommend getting some citrus essential oil. I think for some reason tangerine is really recommended for this layer. So try that, orange, lemon, any of them really could work. But I would go with, try tangerine. Anyway, okay. So, and also put a great fragrant, fresh orange in your environment. And maybe scrape the peel a little bit so that it really, the oil in the peel really allows for that scent to come into the room. Then breathe that in. Have that in your environment. If you happen to be fortunate enough to live in a place where actual citrus trees flower and grow, there's nothing that smells as beautiful as an orange blossom. So if you happen to have one of those around, put that in the room too. And then I would say just sit in a centered kind of meditation, really focusing upon that layer, that second chakra. I'm going to tell you, I have had a lot of issues with that second chakra, so I'm kind of an expert at this layer because it has to do with moving forward. It has to do with hips and extremities and freedom of movement. And I have, time and again, I have had to go back and work at this level. So I have a lot of tricks. But for today, I just want to, when I say tricks, I just mean a lot of tips, suggestions that have really helped me over the years. And as I have just said, I almost always have some orange fragrance in my environment. It really helps me, and it helps me to keep moving forward. It helps me to keep moving forward. So the meditation I'd like to suggest is a walking meditation. The first time I was exposed to this was through reading about it through Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk. I then took a class in different modalities of meditation, and the walking meditation was one that, surprisingly, I found to be just so fantastic. So what I would suggest is that you go to a place. Now, you can do this any place. Honestly, you could do this inside. Right now, I am really tuned into the idea of grounding ourselves. So if it's possible for you to do this outside, in some place where you can be relatively not interrupted, do it there, but wherever. And the idea is to choose some amount of time and to walk at an extremely slow and deliberate and mindful pace, a moving/walking meditation. So let's say 5 minutes. 5 minutes will feel like a long time if you do that. And so this is a great meditation. It's about moving forward, okay, but it's also about being fully present in this moment of coming to be, coming to realize, coming to believe. So you're really very rooted in your body, and so you can really do it so that you feel the heel go down and then the front of the foot, and then the same with the opposite foot. At the end of this, and it can go in a circle, and you walk right back and find yourself back where you began. The idea is always, after every ritual I suggest, to give thanks. Give thanks for your connection to this higher power, for the memory that this is what it's all about, that this is what's breathing you. And then move on through your day. So this is gateway number 2. I did want to just add something toward the end here, which came up as I was saying, try to find a quiet place. The very first meditation class I took was in New York City at the Himalayan Institute a zillion years ago. And my wonderful meditation teacher said at the end of our class that actually over the years he had been working with meditators, he felt that the most successful meditators were those who were urban meditators, who had to deal with a city that was making noise and where things were happening. And their ability to focus, not being in a quiet place or on a mountaintop, he felt was exemplary. So even as I was saying before, choose a quiet place, I guess the whole idea is to find the quiet place inside, isn't it? Okay, my friends. So just have a wonderful day, wonderful rest of the day, whenever you're listening to this. And I look forward to going through the rest of the process of the gateways, the wisdom of 12-step spirituality with you. Here's how I'd like you to find these. You can locate these podcasts on sacredstories.com, sacredstoriesmedia.com, or on the Sacred Stories Media iTunes page, okay? So go to iTunes and look for Sacred Stories Media, or go to sacredstories.com or sacredstoriesmedia.com and enjoy. You won't only find podcasts about the gateways. You'll find some wonderful other, beautiful other teachers. So wonderful to share with you today. I'd love feedback. I'd love to hear how this is working for you. Peace and blessings. Bye-bye.